Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel with one of our immediate breaking news updates in terms of injuries in the Premier League. We thought we would give you a quick update in terms of Reece James and Raphinha's injuries because a lot of people in the community will be looking at these worried and looking at their teams going forward. So Ben, what's the latest with Reece James's injury that you can tell us about?
So yeah, Reece James, as we've seen, forced off just before the half-hour mark in the early kickoff. We didn't expect to get much from Thomas Tuchel. Comes out and he said, Reece is in a lot of pain. He looked in clear discomfort there. He twisted his ankle, but they play it down. We'll probably be sent for images to determine the extent of that. However, looking at that video footage and trying to fill in some of the gaps, it was a little bit of a coming together with Jack Grealish early on. And he went down and he had extensive treatment, but he was able to continue. Now, mechanism of injury looks as if that foot was forced to rotate externally. Now, potentially, that could damage the area just above the ankle, the syndesmosis area, which means it's slightly worse than a straightforward ankle sprain. We're talking about a high ankle sprain here. Now, again, I stress that we're just looking at video footage. We're speculating to an extent, but potentially that mechanism of injury does indicate that it's a classic high ankle sprain. Now, if that's the case, of course, people want to know average, return to play for Reece. I've looked at the database. Now, typically, the doctors would tell you 4 to 6 weeks. What we have from the Premier Injuries database, which has been built up over the last maybe 13 or 14 years, average return to play is around about 56 days. So it could be a lengthy spell on the sidelines. However, there are instances where somebody has returned within 28 days. But similarly, the far end of the other end of the scale, it's over 100 days. So as always, it depends on the severity and that player's response. What we do know and what we hope is there are two types of injuries, one which would involve a bone break and one which is fairly stable and shouldn't just require a little bit of rest and recovery. Because Reece James actually continued on and tried to play on through the pain, as it were, that's a good indication that there's no bone break there. And indeed, Reece James was spotted post-match. He wasn't wearing a calm boot. He didn't have a protective cast on. So again, that's a very good indication that maybe the injury isn't as severe as potentially it could have been.
And with these situations as well, return to play is not always return to full kind of abilities. So even then, he would have to have a little bit of time to get up to match fitness. And we've seen as well, Tuchel is not shy of doing a bit of rotation. Looking at the team then, what is going to be the adjustments there? I think Cesar Azpilicueta is going to come in at basically right wing back, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done my predicted lineup for Chelsea ahead of the game with City, and I was very surprised to see Thiago Silva actually omitted from that starting 11. However, all became clear when Tuchel actually confirmed that Silva had been carrying a knock and he was actually a doubt for the game. So ordinarily, we would have seen a back three of Christensen, Antonio Rudiger, and Thiago Silva. That's your back three centrally. And then, on the two sort of flanks, you would have on the left-hand side, Marcus Alonso, and on the right, Cesar Azpilicueta.
So going forward, your advice is probably that Reece James should vacate people's teams and that Cesar Azpilicueta might actually be even more of a better FPL option. I've been quite a fan of him as a 6 mil way into the Chelsea defence, but he'll be attacking even more and he's got that quality.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say here, the international break comes at a good time. So we know, obviously, it's highly likely that he will miss out in game week 7. Then we have a 2-week break. Possibly he may miss, game week 8. And then after that, if everything was, went well, then he may only miss 2 Premier League games. But for me, like you say, he wasn't nailed down in that starting 11 anyway for the Premier League. So I think it makes sense to move elsewhere. Cesar Azpilicueta is a great shout. We know that Tuchel likes to tinker with that back line, but in recent matches, we've seen a lot more settled, certainly in terms of their Premier League lineups. So maybe, like I say, I'm a big fan of Christensen as well at his price point, but they're all appealing assets at this moment.
And so quickly on to Raphinha then. The situation there doesn't seem as bad as people are kind of worrying about.
Yeah, well, we're hoping for a quite a relatively quiet week. Of course, he picked up a knock at Newcastle, and there were doubts prior to that Newcastle game whether he would be available. So he's been managing ongoing issues, knee, thigh, hip-related problems. Played today, withdrawn, actually indicated to Bielsa that he needed to come off. That was in and around that 69th minute. There were fears of a setback because he's actually scoring and he's performing so well. He's high ownership. The Twitter rumor mill is went into overdrive. Managers into meltdown. However, Bielsa's come out and he said, look, we took him off, but there is no injury there. So I think the issue is it's that problem just as it gets late into the game, a little bit of fatigue related, hasn't trained at all this week. So that could be a reason as to why he maybe felt it a little bit more. But fingers crossed, if Bielsa is to be believed, then it was just a precautionary measure to manage Raphinha, and he should be back available, fit and well, or as well as can be expected for game week 7.
Well, there you go. That is one of our rapid injury updates. We'll keep you up to date with other injuries as and when we know the most up-to-date information. But like we say here at the Premier Injuries channel, this is all about fact, no rumour, no misinformation. This is all off hot the press and great high-level analysis. So do remember to subscribe to the channel so that you can have the latest and greatest updates in terms of helping you with the FPL teams. But for now, we're just going to wish you the rest of your weekend. Hopefully no more injuries and the best of luck with your FPL teams.